Okay, having a quorum, I would like to open the Architectural Board of Review for August 10th, 2009, starting with general business, public comment. Anyone in the audience would like to address the board on seeing no one, I'll close that portion and bring it back to B, approval of the minutes of the ABR, July 27th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Paul. First, second by Keith. Second by Clay, sorry. Anything before item 1? Item 1. This was 2 weeks ago. I wasn't here, so if you guys see anything. Item 2.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Paul?
On page 6 for item 2 under the motion, we continue that to the consent calendar for preliminary and final, but that's not noted in the minutes. Do we not need to note that as an action?
Is item 2?
Item 2, motion was continued indefinitely to the consent calendar with comments.
Right.
But it was to continue to consent for preliminary and final.
Okay. Okay. It's on page 6. Okay, item 3. Yes, Keith.
Item 2 of the motion, I believe refinements should be made to create a more investment friendly residential experience.
Okay. Item 4.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Paul.
Under present, it said Brent Jewett, and it's actually Britt Jewett. So it's Britt, Jewett, maybe? Jewett, or IT? Look it up in the phone book. Britt Jewett.
Okay. Item 5, postponed indefinitely. Okay. All those in favor of the minutes as amended, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Consent agenda, July 27th. Have a motion for that?
So moved.
So moved by Keith, second by Clay. Let staff go through the consent.
Okay. Item A, 631 Olive Street, continued indefinitely. Item B, 435 East Haley Street, final approval as submitted. Item C, 3768 State Street, final approval as submitted. Item D, 3855 State Street, final of the approval as submitted of the landscaping and final approval as submitted of the architecture. Item E, 911 De La Vina Street, final approval as submitted of the landscaping. Items B, C, and D were reviewed by Clay Orell, and items D and E were reviewed by Carol Gross.
Okay. And that was consent for today, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Do we have consent for any? We don't have to do it for the 27th, do we?
This would be the consent calendar for August the 3rd.
August 3rd. Okay.
Item A, 3855.
Okay. Sorry, we have to vote on the first consent. So, all those in favor of the consent agenda for today, as noted, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes. So, a motion for opening the August 3rd by Clay first, second by Keith. Okay, go ahead.
The one that
We had the motion on was August 10th.
As today's, correct.
And then now I'm going to do the August 3rd.
Correct.
So item A is 3855 State Street.
continued 1 week with comments. Item B, 911 De La Vina Street, Final approval as submitted of the architecture and landscaping continued 1 week with comments. Item C, 428 East Haley Street, final approval as submitted. Item D, 631 Olive Street, continued 1 week to consent with comments. The items on the consent calendar were reviewed by Clay Uriel.
Great, thanks. All those in favor of consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, so that closes that portion. Bring it back to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals. The items. Announcements, nope.
Mr. Chair, I'll step
Paul?
down on item 1.
All right.
Hopefully we'll have a quorum and Carol will show up by then.
Item 1.
Item 1 is with Brunel Branch Pester.
Okay, Paul. Any other announcements? Nobody running for city council or mayor? Okay.
There's, I have announced that Dawn Sherry, Christopher Gilliland, and Gary Mosel will be absent from today's meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Subcommittee reports. No subcommittee reports. No subcommittee reports. So that closes general business, and we will go on to the first item, which is the continued discussion item, review of revised August 2009 draft of Upper State Street design guidelines.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Architecture Board of Review. My name is Heather Baker, project planner. Oh, excuse me, I wasn't on mic. So, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Architectural Board of Review. My name is Heather Baker. I'm a project planner with the Design Review and Historic Preservation section. I presented the guidelines to you earlier this year on June 15th, 2009. The Planning Commission also reviewed a version of the guidelines on June 11th. As a result of those two reviews, a subcommittee was formed, 3 members of the ABR and 3 members of the Planning Commission, to work with staff on the guidelines. So since that time, we've gone through 3 interim drafts of the guidelines with the subcommittee and revised it and improved it with each iteration. I just wanted to just briefly walk you through some of the major changes that the group worked on. We corrected maps and we added photos. We renumbered the guidelines to be continuous throughout the document, so it's 1 through 66 now. And there was a lot of general fine editing comments that we received from the subcommittee members just to reduce typos, grammar errors, and increase clarity throughout the document. In Chapter 1, the introduction was rewritten just to make the focus of the document very clear. And we eliminated a section on sub-neighborhood that was a carryover from the previous 1990s version of the guidelines. In Chapter 2, guideline number 4 regarding front setback modification considerations received quite a bit of attention from the subcommittee. And so you'll see a list there of things that are considered for front setback mods where they would be most likely possible. There's better introduction language regarding parking issues, what the goals, issues, and needs are for parking. We also minimize repetition in the guidelines of some of the different topics, for example, rear parking, parking lot, barrier removal, etc. And instead we used cross-references where there was repetitive language regarding those items. That did result in some of the guidelines being removed, and so we have a fewer total number of guidelines in the document. We've included photos of rear parking lot examples. There's 3 different examples now included in Chapter 2 of that layout, site layout. And then in Chapter 3, there is just a couple pagination errors that we're still going to be fixing for the final version, but they're not major at this point. We corrected the diagram that shows the sub-areas. There's one that's a east sub-area and includes Mackenzie Park on one side now. Guideline 24 regarding 3-story buildings also was a focus of editing by the subcommittee. Just what kind of community benefits would be expected to be provided for 3-story buildings. Also, we emphasize the importance of not just view corridors, but also providing viewing locations, for example, from the south side of State Street. The Creek section was reviewed by the Creeks Division staff, and so I incorporated their edits. Guideline 45 regarding windows was worked on by members of the ABR that were on the subcommittee, as well as the street facades, guideline number 47. We added something about not having obtrusive planters that really create a separation between pedestrian and entrances and the street facade. And then the tree planting and protection guidelines were reorganized a bit. And then in Chapter 4, we added onto the list of potential public-private projects that could be considered in Guideline 66. So altogether, it seems like the document has received quite a bit more review and editing and comment and discussion than it did have when it was last presented to you. And the recommendation is that the ABR would review and comment today. We can answer any questions. And then we're hoping for a recommendation for the guidelines to be brought to the City Council for consideration for adoption. And Betty Weiss, City Planner, has just joined us, and she can help with answering any questions or comments as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Heather, am I to understand that this is the last iteration before it goes to City Council? Or?
Yes, that's what we're hoping, is that it's ready for that stage. Staff feels that it's ready. The only last minor comments that I received, Sheila Lodge did call me today and left a message regarding page 1-4. There's just a minor underlining error there, and she wanted to point out that alternatives to vehicle transportation, obviously it's a bus is also a vehicle, so I'll resolve that language inconsistency. And then there's a point in the document where it states parking operations cause a problem with congestion, and we're going to change that word operations to activities. Just very minor types of comments that I'm getting at this point, but it does seem ready for a City Council review at this point. So, but we are interested in your comment as well from the Architectural Board of Review.
Okay, thanks. So, starting from the east, Keith, you want to?
And there is public comment too. We did receive, and I think you must have been distributed the letters from Richard Solomon commenting about the 20-foot setbacks and the importance of that from the sidewalks to be maintained. We have a letter from Paula Westbury, and then Paul Hernati is in the audience from the CPA, Citizens Planning Association, who'd like to speak.
So we'll take that. Paul, would you like to come forward?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon.
And board members and Heather and everybody else. I am Paul Hernadi summarizing a letter.
Can you get a little closer to the mic just so they
Yeah.
pick you up?
Please remind me again because I always move away. I am Paul Hernadi summarizing a letter to be submitted to you by the Citizens Planning Association's South County Land Use Committee. Of course, the document wasn't available very much in advance, so we were rushing to finish it. That's why you did not receive the letter in advance. And I am summarizing it. First of all, many thanks for the careful work of staff and the subcommittee on the revised guidelines. Several of our initial concerns have been eliminated by the revised draft, but a few concerns have remained and yield the following 4 recommendations. First, we continue to believe that the legislative intent of the SD2 ordinance should be explicitly reaffirmed in the final version of the guidelines. As you probably recall, the intent was, and I quote, to prevent the volumes of traffic on State Street from exceeding acceptable limits and to limit increased air pollution due to vehicular traffic. This admirable intent is still valid, of course, but the framers of the SD2 ordinance didn't envision the financial feasibility of meeting the city's on-site parking requirements by large underground structures. We believe, therefore, that the finalized guidelines should stipulate the provision of landscaped open space for a significant segment of that part of a project's total site which is no longer needed for surface parking. Without such a requirement, the intent of the SD2 ordinance would be thwarted by dense overdevelopment, leading to increased traffic and air pollution. Our second recommendation addresses traffic-related air pollution, which is a very serious concern if we want to increase the number of people walking, biking, and residing along Upper State Street. The potential health gains due to working, shopping, and living in walkable urban centers must not be compromised by greatly increased risks to the respiratory system of so-called sensitive receptors including children. In other words, we should aim at reducing obesity without ignoring the perils of outdoor exercise near major congested roadways. According to the American Lung Association of California, asthma is, and I quote, the #1 cause of hospitalization among children, with 160,000 in California alone. The revised guidelines deserve praise for conveying health-related insights about the high environmental value of urban vegetation, creek protection, generous setbacks, and other open spaces. In our opinion, those widely scattered remarks should serve as the basis for a forceful general statement about the important role of landscaped open spaces in improving air quality in the Upper State Street area. The last two recommendations I can summarize in less time. Our third recommendation concerns building heights. The SD2 ordinance provides that a 3-story building be only permitted if it doesn't exceed the total floor area of a 2-story building, and I quote, which could be constructed on the lot in compliance with all applicable regulations. To promote realistic calculations, the final version of the guidelines should insist on subtracting from the hypothetical 2-story structure's buildable lot size not only the square footage of all required open spaces, this is usually done, but also the square footage of the sidewalks and driveways needed for adequate internal circulation. Fourth and last, we recommend making more user-friendly the third final section of the guidelines about modification approvals. This 2-sentence section attempts to clarify its intended message by referring to Guideline 4, which addresses the specific topic of front setback modification considerations, and to Guideline 24, which is not concerned with modifications at all, but includes the important stipulation that, and I quote, proposed structures over 2 stories are expected to include benefits for the community at large, provided in quantity and quality beyond customary requirements. A general stipulation along those lines would be a most desirable addition to the final section of the guidelines because it would clarify that non-routine extraordinary community benefits are a prerequisite for the approval of zoning modification requests. We thank you in advance for your consideration of our input. And I distribute now the letters, unfortunately a few hours too late for you to fully consider it, but we are planning to make similar requests for or recommendations to City Council when it reaches there. The first one is the original signed one. I don't know who needs to have that. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no one else for public comment, I'll close that portion of it. Bring it back to the board for comments. Heather, you had something you wanted to say?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I was just looking at the last page, and this was regarding Mr. Hernati's comment with the third recommendation they had, with a desire that modifications should only be approved with substantial community benefits. The very last sentence of the guidelines on 5-4 does state, for Upper State Street area projects proposing mods to development standards, such projects should only be approved to consistent with Guideline 4 and with provision of substantial community benefits as listed in Guideline 24. So I'm not sure, does that, maybe it was just missed in the CPA's review, or does that satisfy Recommendation 3 that you had?
Mr. Chair, may I
Go, could you come forward and speak in the mic?
Just for
Go
clarity.
ahead, yeah.
The question in our mind was whether substantial is a clear enough indication that the benefits should be over and above what is usually expected. And that's why we were hoping that a word like extraordinary benefits or something like that could be substituted for substantial, because benefits can be substantial without being extraordinary. They might just be the benefits that certain regulations prescribe. Thank you for asking a very good question.
Thank you, Mr. Hernati.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
go ahead.
think so. The language in the other guidelines said in quantity and quality above what's customary. So I think staff would be amenable to using that language on 5-4 rather than the word substantial if the board likes that.
Oh, so take out this word substantial, over and above, you said?
In quantity and quality.
Okay.
Let's see, where was that? Just want to make sure I say it right. Guideline 24 is what he was quoting from. To include benefits for the community at large, provided in quantity and quality beyond customary requirements. We could use that phrase.
Okay, sounds
Repeat
good.
it. Okay.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, so now I will close that portion, public comment, and come back to the board for comments. Keith?
Just to weigh in on that last comment about that language, I would concur with Heather's conclusion there, and that was actually a fair amount of discussion in the subcommittee about that specific language, and we specifically wanted to avoid extraordinary and words of that type. So I believe the quantity and quality phrase is more appropriate. Also, I'm not quite sure how aesthetic guidelines can deal with some of the traffic and air pollution concerns that were brought up, and I think those are kind of larger planning issues that are rather difficult to address in aesthetic guidelines. Regarding the guidelines themselves, I know the staff's been really challenged with resources and schedule to get these done with conflicting demands of other projects like the Plan Santa Barbara. That being said, I guess I can't help but feel a little disappointed in that I feel like there's not a lot of real new information in here that as a board is going to help us evaluate specific projects as they come in. And I think a lot of the issues that we're talking about with as far as compatibility and the pedestrian issues are things that we would probably address just with the existing guidelines we have. So I guess I guess I come away without a real strong vision of what the community's thinking for Upper State Street aesthetically. And I look forward to the Plan Santa Barbara looking at and addressing the larger planning issues in the area of land use and density and applying the MOTA there and what we come up with and how that would then get the guidelines more fine-tuned. But, I think we as a subcommittee went over a lot of the specific language quite a bit, and I think that I'm happy with how all that's come out to address the concerns of the committee as well as the general goals that the city had for these. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Keith. Lee?
Mr. Chair and staff, today I actually sat and read through this cover to cover, and I think there's been a lot of revisions and changes and things on this document along the way, and I think a lot of them are definitely going in the right direction. The document itself, though, has some interesting contradictories, and I seem to have, as an architect, when I read through this, if I was, I said this before in a subcommittee meeting, if I was to take this document and read it and not knowing anything about Santa Barbara, it doesn't give me any real clear direction for this area. And I'll just cite an example. On page 3-4, guideline number 11 talks about key characteristics of the Upper State Corridor subareas and neighborhoods have key characteristics that define their character and sense of place. Proposals should be within a range of architectural styles and materials appropriate with each sub-area. Inclusion of more contemporary styles and natural materials such as sandstone, stucco, and tile is encouraged, which gives a broad base. And then when we get back into aesthetic architectural guidelines back here, it seems to me that that the guidelines for the architectural portion of this document are basically, Santa Barbara style, Mediterranean. It talks about that, and so I think that those things kind of contradict each other. I don't necessarily think one's better than the other, but it's an interesting thing in here. And then the other part that I've noticed a few things that we've talked about in subcommittee that hadn't made it in here. But there's one item that we've talked about as a board. We talked about this months and months and months and months ago. Is the whole notion of creating a pedestrian environment in the Upper State Street corridor, and we talk about where parking should and shouldn't be and how it should be located, and that it should be in the rear, but then if you want it in the front because of view corridors, then that's acceptable. But I think that the one thing that this document's missing is a real clear direction for the future of this area. There's one thing to talk about managing things that have happened over the past and trying to correct them. And I think this document starts to try to do that. It's how do we correct the things that have happened on Upper State Street for years and years and years. But what is Upper State Street going to look like in 30 years from now? Are we still going to have all the traffic lanes and fighting driveways and bus turnouts and all those things, or are we actually going to plan for something that's a little bit more future-based? I think that as a board, at one point we talked about this as having parking nodes where there was, like downtown, you can park in parking lots and walk State Street. And if we really want to promote pedestrian use and pedestrian walking, and if we can abolish obesity with this document, that would be wonderful. I don't know how that we could do that, but I'd support it. But how do we really get people out of their cars and avoid having to go, stopping at Radio Shack and then getting in their car to go to Gelson's and then getting in their car to go to, the next thing down the street? That's where I think this document as a whole sort of falls apart for me, is the notion that there really isn't a vision for 30 years down the road. Let's start promoting people doing developments that encourage parking nodes or encourage things that will have people get out of their car and create a more retail environment. And it's a little bit like the chicken and the egg, right? If you don't have the uses to go, why put the parking there? Or if I'm not clear. I don't think I'm being clear. If you have an area that has a lot of retail, and then, like State Street, for example, Lower State Street, and you can get out of your car and you can hit a bunch of different areas. If those things aren't already there, then it doesn't justify putting a parking node in. But I think that there's some ways to consider this area in the vision of it so that we can plan for that in the future. I'm still nervous about the guidelines to link people's parking lots together. That's come up in the subcommittee, and it's in this document that somebody doing a development should remove any barriers between his parking lot and the neighbor's parking lot. And I think that that's I don't think that we can require that as a city. I don't think we can legally require somebody to give up their property line rights and allow adjacent people to travel, adjacent property owners and their constituents to travel on their property. I don't know that we can legally do that. I'd be curious to know that. I definitely agree with taking out driveways and turnouts along State Street to reduce the mid-block traffic that we see from people pulling in and out of shopping centers. But it says draft. I'm just thinking like there's some other things that we're not addressing in here, and I think we should. I think we should be able to give people real clear direction architecturally and in planning ways that really strengthen what the future of this is going to be, not looking backwards and not trying to prevent what happened. I think we got to look forward, and how are we going to plan this out, and what are we going to do to encourage people to take on these things for the future. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Clay. Hits on some good points. Paul?
I actually missed the meeting in June, so I wasn't here, and then I did peruse this quickly over the weekend. I actually enjoyed it and found it warm and fuzzy in the sense that you go through this and I can kind of understand what we want to do in the future. But that's because I'm involved in all these meetings and I have an idea in my head, so I can just plug what I already have in my head onto the paper. Listening to Clay saying you give this to somebody from out of town, they're going to come up with a completely different vision than locally what we've had, because we've had all these meetings with other community people. So in some respects it is pretty broad-based, but I think it also provides a vehicle in which we can continue to develop in the upper State Street area, which was the purpose of this document. So for that reason, I think we're moving in the right direction. A couple of photographs need to be corrected. They say Loretta Plaza when it's actually the San Roque Plaza or something like that. It's in two different locations, so that needs to be taken a look at. Clay's comment about what the future is for parking nodes and everything like that, those are some serious things that we did talk about, that if they're not incorporated in this document, they should be definitely incorporated in the general plan. Because if we want to look at what our Leapfrog 30-year vision is, we had some great ideas from lots of different people about how to develop that. This is more like, here's these projects, how are we going to insert them into the existing fabric? Now let's take, what do we see for the Bolta fabric 30 years from now? So there's maybe two different things, and this document isn't meant to adjust the future, but there are some valuable discussions that we've had as a city whole that need to be referenced, moved on to the Plan Santa Barbara group.
Thank you, Paul. Carol, would you like to comment and address? No? Okay. I think, I have a similar comment to all the members of the board. I read through it and I thought that, as Paul says, I think it's warm and fuzzy. I think the language says, when I read it, I thought it was all good thoughts, that this is where we should be thinking like this all the time, put it that way. It's like somebody put into words how we should be thinking all the time. And I'm thinking that all the people who had been doing work on the Upper State Street should have been thinking about this all the time. What I thought the document was weak in is that it does not give us a vision of what are we going to require of applicants that is going to take us for sure to that spot that we want to go in the Upper State Street. What we know that we want it to be like that, how do we require them to get there? It says what our goals are, and all of the goals I think are admirable, and the ways that we would apply some of those things are good. But I felt that if you read the document, I felt that if we just utilize this going forward, we would end up with another 10 years of what's happening now and us telling applicants that, you should provide more pedestrian walkways or better views. But it does not, it's not strong enough in driving that vision then, so that we know in 10 to 15 years of development, that part of State Street will definitely change to this vision. And that's the part that I thought that I couldn't find that in the document, that we're not getting that. But I really think it's a good start because it really puts into words what we should be thinking about all the time as we do stuff there now. So that part of it is very good. If you'd bear with me, just so I could pass on some thoughts on the document, the paperwork itself, I think that in the table of contents, when we have a title of urban design, and then when you go to part 3, it reads design elements. So it should read the same. Was there a reason why in the figure 2 surrounding general plan neighborhoods it did not include the North State Street neighborhood in that map? I'm just gonna. I don't think you need to really say. I'm just gonna tell you from a person reading it for the first time. This is what I saw. Maybe it doesn't need it. So it's not a big deal. I'm just kind of pointing it out, and you can run with it. Let's see here on 2.8. And there are 2 images that we use in 2.8, and it deals with view of the entrance to the rear parking lot from State Street and view of State Street of a retail complex at State Street. And it's in there because of developments that have been done on State Street. It has nice landscaping, but it has the parking in the back which you're advocating. And not too many pages on each side of this is talking about entrances to buildings. And these are 2 particular developments that I have found that are very weak on the pedestrian entrance to the street. It definitely tells you, like, how do you get into those buildings? Like, you just can't find them. And then you see the slot between the 2 buildings, and you see a parking lot down there. And yet, it's really a car entrance to get in. Because even the walkway to get in from State Street, as you see it, it's not lined with trees or anything. It's just like a slot between the buildings, and you go in there and then look for the entrances in there. So it really is weak in that regard, and I would not kind of advocate trying to... you're showing them one thing, but it also has a bad aspect of it compared to something else in the document that you might want to push. You know what I mean? On chapter 3, the next page over, where just under the writing before the figure starts, it says figure 6 is an example of an application of existing standards and then it just goes away. Oh, and the 1 guidelines. Okay, I missed the word the one down here. Sorry. So let's see. And here's one good thing. I mean, not one. There's many good things, but this on 3 of 14. After reading all the different goals that you had, particularly on this one, it says encourage variation of building heights and require the height, bulk, mass, and scale of buildings. And just the word require, I thought was going in a good direction because it was strengthening your document to say that this is what we're about, this is what we want to have, and we are going to make this happen. You know what I mean? And again, guideline number 44, which is on the next page over, that's what I was relating to with those 2 images where it was at odds with that statement then. On page 4 of 3, under the last item of the goal, where it says surrounding neighborhoods, implement streetscape improvements and pedestrian and bicycle connections through private projects or districts. And I just wanted to get a clarity. Does that mean that only private applicants would make these improvements and the city would not take it upon themselves in any kind of improvement project? Or am I reading that incorrectly? Yes, please. Thanks, Ed.
Mr. Chair, let's see. So implement streetscape improvements and pedestrian and bicycle connections through private projects, or I think that would probably be a district. I think it's just acknowledging that we don't have funds set aside for like a comprehensive city program of this type. Not to say that they couldn't be used at some point for that, but I think the emphasis of these guidelines is regulating individual projects as they come forward. So.
Okay, so it would help that, I mean, reading this as just a citizen public, it seems to me it's like these goals are only for the people who are, for applicants, just as you stated, and the city is not doing this portion of things. So you want to make that clear in the document some way that it's really only for applicants, because it seems like you're putting the onus of the change totally on the private sector then.
Yeah, the original Upper State Street study actually had 2 chapters on public improvements, like short-term and long-term, and so we purposely left those just to be referenced in the study, and then this focuses on what individual projects do. So I'll see if I can't emphasize that point a little bit more somewhere in the introductory language.
And that's it really, just a small thing. Okay, that's my input. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I had a couple of just
Clay.
minor comments about just some graphic things.
Yep.
On the bottom of page, this page number is not showing on this one, 3-2, the bottom right-hand corner, there's a box that says diagram to scale, not to scale, street rights. That there's 2 boxes of that there. Oh, yours is different than mine.
Oh yeah. One overlaps the other.
Yeah, it's not on her version, but it's on my version.
Okay.
And then on the 3.3-3, on the diagram figure 5, mine says Mackenzie Park's on the left, and it says the north side of the street underneath it. That would be the south side. So you might just flip the image, because all the images have the south on the right and the north on the left. Never got your umbrellas in there. Those are the only 2 things I had.
Mr. Chair, are you interested in any staff response to the comments?
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah,
we really appreciate your comments and review, and also especially with the subcommittee member work throughout these last couple months with staff. I think most of the comments that the board has given us, we can definitely do some things with, although, of course, not the overarching comment that it's not the visionary document that has the depth and the clear vision that we were looking for. And I didn't repeat the presentation that I gave the first time, which I came to the board about. Yes, there are substantial budget constraints that the city is under right now. We had originally hoped to have a comprehensive form-based guideline approach, deep, comprehensive consultant contract to really update these and make them where we want to go. And so, perhaps at some point in the future that'll be possible. But these do at least carry forward the work that was done on the Upper State Street study area, as well as incorporate the previous guidelines and update them to some extent. So we're happy that at least you can see that it does summarize what people should be thinking about for the Upper State Street area. And what we're looking for is a recommendation from the ABR that we could take this to City Council with the few changes that you've suggested to make it a better document.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather. And I have one additional area that I wanted to comment and bring to your attention. Your comments about how this can be helpful and helps focus, be it on a project by project and a little bit in a broader sense, as well. The criteria that we've repeated on the last page of the guidelines, I think, is where we're hoping, our understanding is that's where the muscle or the implementation, the strength of these guidelines actually come when you apply them and make findings relative to this criteria. So you can see criteria number 1. This is that new ordinance that the council put in place so that when you're looking at projects, if you find that the project design is consistent with the guidelines applicable to the location and within this part of the city, to make that finding, you'll be using these guidelines. And so that's where some of the broad language and general language, because it varies so much throughout the corridor, there are 3 different areas, and even on one side of the street or the other, it's when it comes down to your project review, your approval or denial, the requirement, did they go far enough? Are they missing an opportunity, a big one, for a substantial improvement? Is whether or not you find that the project does meets these criteria in a positive way. And so I think that's what the City Council is also really looking to have these things work together. This criteria and the guidelines together give you the authority, guidance to have the conversation with the applicants to say, yes, this is the right project or it's not.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Heather.
Yeah,
Thanks,
sure.
Betty.
Oh, and Mr. Chair, I did
Yes,
want to
Heather.
comment on just one of your comments specifically and about how the photos don't show the most ideal pedestrian entrances for those rear parking lot examples. And I just want to comment that was a problem we had throughout the guidelines of trying to find examples to illustrate a certain point.
Right.
We often realize that, okay, well, maybe this is a great example of a parking lot connection, but perhaps the architects that were on the subcommittee thought, well, this isn't a great example of how to design a building. Or we might have found this form of the building shows a great setback that allows for a mountain view, but yet we wouldn't want that particular building style or architectural solution repeated. So that was kind of an issue throughout the document. Maybe I should put something in the introduction that for the examples provided, please look at it just for the particular aspect of it that we're presenting it for.
That's fine.
So, yeah. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so can we make a motion then for passing this on to City Council? Anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair?
Paul, go ahead.
A motion for passing the guidelines that were prepared by staff onto the City Council level for review, recognizing the positive work done in the general sense of designing for each individual site, and the ABR either I don't want to use disappointed because it sounds not good, but I want to say is the ABR looks forward to the Upper State Street design, or the Plan Santa Barbara design review process to address the future vision for this area. And that
Betty?
comments.
Do we have a second to go under discussion? Second by Keith, under discussion. Betty?
Thank you. A lot of people have a lot of hopes for Plan Santa Barbara. So I want to clarify the one that I think is in your motion about the Plan Santa Barbara design guidelines. Design guidelines aren't per se an outcome of this phase of the general plan update, Plan Santa Barbara. What we are looking to do is update our housing element and update our land use element and the land use map, have a certified environmental impact report to support all that, as well as an adaptive management plan, and then a whole implementation plan. That there are already in the general plan land use element a number of policies for doing area-specific studies, and that's in the current housing element and general plan. And Plan Santa Barbara explains that further, and hopefully with the update of the housing element and the general plan, we will have more consensus understanding and direction for how the Upper State Street area is a unique area and what levels of density, but again, in a very broad sense. So what this process is about is we started the Upper State Street study even though we had not yet done Plan Santa Barbara. We were just about to start that. So then we did this and said, okay, well, this is good for now, but we need to answer these big, broad questions, and then at another time get back to more detail in this Upper State Street area. And we already have a pretty good idea how we'd really like to do that. Design charrettes, more level of detail with the broad planning direction that we'll get from Plan Santa Barbara. So it's kind of it is a little bit of one step at a time. So the only concern I have about your motion is I think it would be that you would look forward to getting back to this again once the Plan Santa Barbara process addresses larger policy issues. Your motion said once the Plan Santa Barbara design guidelines, and that's where I just wanted you to know that I don't think that's going to happen. And then I fully understand your position, though. This did what we were able to do this time, and there's so much more that we could do to help plan for and guide Upper State Street. And so that's what you want to include in your motion. I fully understand and support that. I just wanted to clarify that the language is saying after the Plan Santa Barbara design guidelines are done. I'm sorry that's such a long comment, but you know what I mean?
I do understand,
Okay.
and I can change the verbing to the planned vision for this area, because
Okay.
I think that's what Clay was commenting the
Right.
most, is that we spend a lot of time daydreaming about what we can, and it's exciting, yet this document doesn't address that.
Right.
That we're looking at today.
Looking forward to those things being addressed more fully and then getting back and doing more work out here. I think, do I understand you
Yes.
correctly? Yeah, we feel
Yep.
the same way.
Yep.
So I think we do understand. We'll just nuance the language a little bit, because then council's going to think that Plan Santa Barbara is doing design guidelines too, and maybe,
Right.
it's just a concern I have. Thank you.
So that slight modification, is that okay with Keith? Anything else?
No. So you've modified it just to
Take out the word guideline and replace it with planned vision.
plan vision.
The design, struck design guidelines.
So I think under discussion, I think that what you've said is fine, and what we should also say is that we look forward then to the next step of this, because when we get Plan Santa Barbara to infill the portions that we don't have, we look forward to the next step of this document, which is going to help us further get to that spot. Plan vision, because that's the kind of weakness that we are seeing here among ourselves and the board, and now we've just made to understand that what I'm looking for is really one step over, which is after Plan Santa Barbara comes in, then this gets infused with that, and then something else will come out of that.
Just to clarify, you tacked on one more item to the motion. Is that what you were just doing?
Yes, kind of saying that we look forward to the Plan Santa Barbara
I'm just making sure the secretary's getting this. Okay.
vision and the subsequent update and infusion of the Upper State Street guidelines, and it's taking into consideration what happens with the Plan Santa Barbara work. We look forward to that update.
Mr. Chair, would it be okay if I read what motion I
It
have
would be
back
fine.
here?
It would help us.
Okay, so as I interpret it, the recommendation is to forward the design guidelines to City Council for adoption, incorporating the changes that were discussed here, recognizing the positive direction for designing individual projects that the guidelines provide, and then also that the board looks forward to Plan Santa Barbara's vision for this area being established, and that further work on the guidelines to incorporate that vision would be done as part of a later update. Something like that.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. So,
Under discussion,
yes, on the discussion. Clay?
I'm really reticent about voting for this, and I'll tell you why. On page 4.2, guideline number 59, is this whole issue about parking. And I don't have the solution, but I can't say that I agree with this guideline. Because of, it could be the way that it's worded, I get the intent behind it, but it's saying provide shared access and parking to reduce the number of driveways to Upper State Street, and pool parking supplies for more efficient use of space and parking capacities. Remove existing barriers between parking lots and do not construct new barriers between parking lots. I mean, this is the one part of the guideline of this document that I'm having, all other things aside, this is the one area that I'm having a hard time with. Because I don't think that as a city we should be requiring that of an applicant. Whereas if they submit a project and they haven't done that, then they're going to get scrutinized by it, which is what would most likely happen. So I don't know if we want to put something in the motion that staff's to review this with the city attorney or something like, and make sure that, in my mind though, this one thing would have me not want to vote on this item. In an affirmative.
Yeah, I understand that.
Because in our subcommittee meetings, we actually discussed the issue between the Pete's Coffee lot and the neighboring people that are in a lawsuit over parking issues, or there's something, I don't have all the, there's definitely a disagreement between their parking. And I just think it's odd for us to
I guess
put that into the documentation.
Yeah, when I read it, and it's almost like I feel that what's in that particular guideline should be, it could be more it's more goal oriented.
Yes.
It's goal oriented is that if possible, you would like to see this happen, but actually trying to implement that and telling owners that you have to do that could become a problem. It could be. It also could be problematic design-wise. That if you have, say, an owner on one side of the property who has a very different standard quality of keeping their property, for instance, and they have issues with vagrants or whatever it is, and then you have a new development on the other side that's trying to raise the standard, trying to link them in that way could become a problem that the owners will always bicker about. So I can see that Clay does have a point in it, and I also see that it's a good goal to have, and maybe having that more as a goal oriented and working towards how that gets implemented.
Mr. Chair, under discussion, perhaps we could add an item then to the motion that would read with regard to guideline 59, although the board believes that these are directions that should be encouraged, they have concern about the implementation of requiring such requirements, something to that effect.
Yeah, I would agree to include that in the motion if.
Sure, Mr. Chair and members of the board. There's many things we can do with guidelines to soften them. As you know, we could even change it to explore possibilities to something like that,
Correct.
or encourage. So I'd be amenable to doing that. I do know that on the flip side that we did have a subcommittee member who was very passionate about this particular provision. So, but I think keeping it as a guideline versus a goal makes more sense because it's a little bit more specific. It's a type of thing that can be done, whereas a goal is a broader vision. So I would prefer just to have softening language within the guideline if possible.
So there'd be a rewording then.
Yeah.
So our motion is asking for a rewording of that guideline 59.
Correct.
That's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. So that's what we're asking for in motion. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion as discussed and made, say aye. Aye. Against? Motion carries. Thanks very much, Heather. Betty. Good one, Clay. That's good. Okay.
Tracy,
I mean Tracy, sorry.
how's it going?
Tracy Burnell. He's doing well. Good to see you.
Hey, you too.
A lot of changes at your place since I last met you. Yeah.
Well, you know, things shift around.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have full sets of drawings that were submitted that are here somewhere, but
This was the existing one, just in case you guys want to have a peek.
This is last week.
Apparently, yeah, I wasn't here last week. That's the existing one.
We'll keep it there just in case you need to go back.
Okay. So I am now coming up to speed with this here too. Corner lot, Milper Street, Riddick Street. Milpers and Riddick. East Hill. Oh, one of those. Okay.
well,
If we could, I know you came. It's the last meeting you were here.
yes.
Also, if for some of us, including me, I was not here at the last meeting. So if you could just give me a quick review. I think were both of you here?
I was here.
Here.
No, Carol's here.
Okay, so I'm the odd man
Are we
out.
on here? Is this okay?
Yeah, just press the middle, and there you go.
All right. My name is Tracy Burnell. I'm the architect for the project for Daryl Becker. And to bring Chris up to speed, we are proposing a tenant improvement to an existing building over on Milpa Street where the Zia Cafe was and Boris's Bakery. And at the meeting last time, the board had a couple of comments about the access to the street and one of the landscape items that we were proposing.
As a previous. Okay, you could just leave it here.
That's the ones they just submitted.
Okay,
Yeah, you can just keep those there for the moment. We may
Yeah.
or may not.
we may not need them, so we just want to keep them. Thanks.
So, Chris, previously we had a window here, and we had smaller windows across the front here. And the board had some concerns about the urban design guidelines. So we appreciate the input that the board gave us and have gone through the guidelines again and have made changes here. So we've provided access to the street with a pair of doors, and also provides a visual connection into the office. And we've provided a larger window into the office here, and then we've increased the size of the other windows also, so there's probably a 25% increase in the glass area across the board. Right, and Derek can address the comment having to do with the landscaping.
I wasn't Derek Eichelberg with Arcadia Studio. My understanding was that the last presentation, the two pepper trees that we had proposed inside the courtyard looked not favorably upon, so we've changed those to be Acacia pendula, closest to the street, and Acacia cognata or silverosa, adjacent to the fountain. Everything else is the same.
So basically, that sums it up. They're pretty minor, the comments that were last time. So we've made these changes. We feel like we've got a really great building that's going to improve the situation down on Milpa Street by providing a real gem of a piece of architecture. And we are under some real time constraints, so we actually completed the working drawings at the last meeting. We have them complete again this week and are hoping to get final approval with whatever comments the board may have.
Okay, I think it looks pretty simple to me. There's two items on the motion. The board finds the overall project acceptable. However, the applicant is encouraged to revise the Milpa Street elevation to address the urban design guidelines to provide a more pedestrian-friendly facade, and the inclusion of the door versus the window that you had there before. And the second one was restudy the use of the proposed pepper tree, and that full stop, and that's the end of it. And so I think we've discussed the pepper tree. Is that something? Before we go into comment, I'd like to just open it up to public comment. Do we have any letters? We have a letter here from Paula Westbury. We acknowledge a letter from Paula Westbury. Seeing no one else in the public to comment, I'll close that portion of it. Bring it back to the board for comments. Keith?
Okay. I appreciate the additional windows along the Milpas frontage. Still can't help but feel that it's less pedestrian friendly than what we started with. So anyway, that's my comments.
Clay?
Mr. Chair, I like the project. I like what you're doing with the building. I know the building well. I definitely appreciate the larger window addition and this door. I can see, on your floor plan what you're working with. And I still kind of feel the same as Keith about the pedestrian friendliness. That was a big point of discussion last time that the minutes I don't think 100% reflect, but
That really was the main point.
that was that's where everybody had something to say about. I think that this is definitely going in the right direction. I'm just still uncomfortable with where we're leaving this ground floor.
I had a couple of comments whenever you're done with
Okay.
it.
Carol?
So this document that was brought in, is this the...
This is just the working drawings. I think that's the previous... Was that the previous one?
Okay, I'm trying to find the previous one.
Yeah.
Could you throw that down? Thank you. I can't see that.
Yeah, but we have to show it to the cameras. You want to come?
Okay.
You want to come across, take Paul's seat? Paul's seat?
If I could just see it for 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, so originally there were 2 doors, and so the last time there were 0 doors, and now we're adding 1 door.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, that's my question.
That's your question?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to comment? Go into your comments.
I think this is in the spirit and nature of what we were asking for last time. We did not clarify whether we're looking for the same amount of doors, and the urban guidelines wants to have a frontage opening, so I think this is in the spirit of what our discussion was leading last time. So I'm fine with this proposal, including the landscape changes.
Okay. We have from Keith and Clay. My thoughts is that I'm seeing this for the first time, and hearing where we started and where we are now. When I looked at the elevations, design-wise, the building looks good. But seeing that the comment and the way the previous meeting went with pedestrian friendly, my first impression of the east elevation, which is the Milpas Street elevation, is that it looks great for a side street elevation. Like, I would not expect that on Milpas Street. And not that I would not expect it, but if it were being remodeled, I'd prefer to see it stronger in the pedestrian route myself. However, I think I'm going to leave the strength of that statement to reside with the board members who were here previously. coming at this later stage of the project. I would just rather let the other members who were here at the previous meeting take control of that aspect of it. Seeing as we'd heard from the two members, and we may hear from them some more, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Tracy?
I think it's important to keep the spirit of the guidelines in mind here as we take a look at this, and also to consider that there are several other aspects of the urban design guidelines that, the Chapter 3, it deals with the pedestrian edge, but there are other ones that talk about, having integrity in an overall design sense, relating to buildings next door, size, bulk, and scale, things like that aren't necessarily addressed here. But the one in particular that I think is appropriate here is that it talks about the intended function or program of the building will be considered with specific attention to placement of doors and windows, and they talk about issues of security and things of that nature. And I think that Mr. Becker is very interested in, of course, as architects, we're interested in our designs having integrity, and that, form follows function is a big piece of this, and to push this in the direction of a retail look, I don't think is an honest way to go. And the economics of a street like Milpas or State Street will drive your percentages of office way down because of the pricing of it, the difficulty accessing the parking problems and all that, and it brings retail in for obvious reasons. So I think the guidelines talk about variety, how important that is, and that you're not going to have 50 or 40 or probably even 30% that are office uses on a street like that. And so you're going to end up with variety, you're going to end up with different things happening, even though this may not have as much open to the street as some. It works with the style of the building. It has an integrity to it that I think is really valid and will help the transition of Milpas Street to a place that is a friendlier environment for offices or whatever that could be a little more open. But there are real issues with security and noise and things like that on that street now. And I think it would be a shame to potentially stop this project from going forward. It's an enormous improvement to a building that's really in disrepair and needs it. And like I said, it'll be one of the few buildings on that street that have a really nice presence and will lead the street to continue to go in a transitional direction. It also talks about corner buildings shall exhibit a strong visual and functional connection with the sidewalks of adjacent streets. So last time there was a comment about that really, this isn't how you perceive the building, but I would disagree very strongly with that. I think coming from the north, yes, you come past the building before you see that, but from the south, this is what you see. And there's an entrance here now that addresses the side street the way this asks for. We've got larger glass. We've pulled the wrought iron off to make it friendlier, and we've provided doors to the street. And I think that Carol is on money saying that we've met the spirit of the guidelines. And, for the reasons I've discussed here, I think this project should be approved.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, one other thing. I just wanted to point out that there's something that happens, and I just have a couple examples here, but if you don't respect the use of the building with the design of it, you sometimes end up with these awkward things like, the Med Center is one where clearly they were asked to put doors and things here. These doors don't even have handles on them, and they're always blinded off, and it isn't successful in creating an alive street interaction because it doesn't respect the use of the building. And that's what I'm talking about with integrity. And some of these others are the same way. They block all of the windows off that they were asked to put in or that were already there, or whatever the deal is, because it's not how they're going to use it. So we feel that we've got something here that works with how we're going to use it and will be an honest design that has integrity that will create that connection to the street that you're after. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask for comments or additional comments, if you have any. No additional. Clay?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I couldn't agree with you more around structural integrity and form and all that. And I think, as an architect, we're always going to look at these things differently. I mean, it's subjective, right? So we're always going to have different opinions on what we think is good and what we think is not, and vice versa. I think this is a great project. I'm really glad to see somebody doing something with this building. My my concern that I brought up at the last meeting was the address of this building is 421 North Milpas, and the entrance is on Reddick. And I think you could still do what you're doing and shuffle the program around and get an entrance that is appropriate, that is your address on the correct street. And that's been my... That's, hold on, let me...
Here, I
There's
don't
a
think we have
mistake in
enough.
the drawings, though. I just wanted to, I walked out with the wrong drawings. That we have changed the program around in the building, so this is a primary entrance now. I apologize. I just took the wrong roll when I walked out the door. Sorry.
So you have new drawings to show us? So
I don't have them here. I have them at the office. I could call and have them down here in 5 minutes, but I just walked out with the wrong set.
So why would we be approving something that's... we can't approve it if this is not the...
It's just clarifying that.
Well, we have a set of drawings here that has...
Right now, it's 421 and 423 Milpas.
So what are the differences?
All of the elevations are right. Everything's here. It's just the plan section of it. We
It just
updated that
says
last-
main entry here. Is that it? That's all?
It doesn't really, yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's all we need to know.
Yeah.
And let's look at that.
Well, the labels I don't think are any better on that. We didn't, where are they?
Office, it says office, two, reception,
Yeah, this is
maybe not so good.
the current set. That just addressed those couple of issues at the same time. And I picked up a chimney that was a mistake. So I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point out that I agree with you, and that we did make that adjustment. This is an entrance, and it addresses the corner issue the way they want it, but it's not the main entrance. So,
Well, if I can just go back a second to some of your comments. I drive by this building all the time because I live on the east side and I work not far from this building, so I'm always driving by this building. And it's been sitting for a very long time when Julian's left, and it's just been sitting there.
Thank you.
The north, traveling north on Milpas, the approach and looking at this building as you've designed it now, for the sake of the camera, right? Looking at this, I think that, I just want to say, I think you've done a bang-up job on that. I think it looks appropriate. I think you're doing enough, you're adding enough design to it without having to redo the whole building, and I think it's the totally appropriate way to go. The side that faces Milpas is the only one I have trouble with. And I don't necessarily think that it should be a series of storefront doors like a retail either. What I was doing, I was sitting over here and I was looking at this and I was going, okay, well, do I like that or that? Or do I like this or do I like that? And I kept going back and forth, just the composition of it. And the only area that I think I'm struggling with is this little tiny window here. And I look at the plan and I go, okay, so we've got built-ins and we've got a little slit window, and that's the accounting office. And obviously you've got security concerns because you've got a nice small window here, and you've got a window over here with the wrought iron grate or grill over it. So programmatically, that makes complete sense to me. But I'm looking at it just from an aesthetic standpoint, and for me, I like that as opposed to that. And if that was the only move across the front here, then I would agree with you that you don't need to have other entrances and other things along the street. For me, it balances out the elevation. And again, it's subjective, right? But I love what you're doing with the building, and I think your drawings are great, and I think it's a great project. I don't want to thwart it. I want to move it along as well. And I'm just seeing something that, for me, it's my comment and it's my opinion, and
Can you clarify
Okay.
what you're saying? What would you like to see?
what am I? When I look at this elevation, that we've now put this larger window in, and we've put this door in, I think everything from here over, to me, I'm totally happy that you all have done that. I think it's great. In my mind, when I look at these if I look at the small window under the balcony and then the large window under the balcony here, I almost want to see this repeated here. So another large window here. So it still has that presence on the street, that it's not retail and storefront, but it's balanced, and it's just, and again, it's a comment. You could tell me to go wherever you want, but it's a comment.
Okay.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I have no problem doing that, but after the last meeting, we took the grills off, which provided security for the large windows. And so I'm sorry.
Oh, you're not on, Peter.
After the last meeting, we took the grills off, which provided security for the large windows. And we left the small window in the accounting office, but left the grill around the corner, as you've noted. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. I don't care. I mean, I'm happy to put the window in there. I'm just trying to create a successful use for our business. And the biggest issues we've dealt with from the very beginning have to do with traffic noise, the quietness and the functionality of using this building on Milpas, which is heavily trafficked and not heavily pedestrian, albeit there is some pedestrian traffic. So if you want to direct us to duplicate that window and put it there and put a grill on it for security reasons, I would be totally in support of that. I mean, that subtle change would be fine. Or approve it as is, addressing our security concerns.
Mr. Chair, can I
Clay, go ahead.
respond? Thank you, and I got that.
Sorry.
What I remember from the last meeting regarding the security grills was that they were set off the wall, and then the question was, do we have an ADA issue? And I don't know that's not in the minutes. It was brought up as a comment during the meeting, however, and whether or not that got resolved, that it isn't, or it was an ADA issue and now that's why it's gone, or it isn't an ADA issue and we just want to go this way in the design. I don't know that because I wasn't in your office for the last 2 weeks while you were working on that.
It's solvable.
So the
As
question
an ADA,
for me is, I'm fine with if you put a larger window here and you could recess those windows enough to put your grill in so you don't have an ADA issue, then as far as I'm concerned, that works for me. If you want to grill both of them, I don't have any issue with that personally. Maybe other board members might, but the detailing that you're providing and the way you're approaching the building, I think is appropriate. So if you can make that work, and that would address your concerns as well. Because security is an issue, I'm very aware.
Okay, we may be getting somewhere, but we need somebody to say what they're going to do.
Well,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Maybe we could take a straw vote, because I think this is fine. I think this is ready for final approval. So if the majority of the board feels differently, this discussion could continue. But if it's a minority, although those are good comments, but if it's a minority thought, then I think we should move it along.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to get success with the straw vote, and I particularly don't want to take the straw vote. I want to lead this to where this is going, where both parties are happy where this is going. I have knowing where this is going right now, I think that there's certain things that I would like to see is that, and they're not big issues, but is whatever we resolve right now, and I'd just like this to be resolved right now and not come back for another meeting. So we pass you guys on. We will just have to say what it is that we've agreed to, and we let you guys go. What's nice about here is that you've shown the recess here, the fact that you're trying to make it more pedestrian friendly, but in the actual construction drawings now that you happen to show us, the amount of reveal that you're showing towards the pedestrian side is unfortunate. I mean, I think you have to give up and give us back some more of that reveal.
No problem.
And that would show us that you're trying to, that we're coming into the building and that you're not just trying to create a wall, so to speak. And that's just my comment. So whatever we agree here now to solve this, I'd just like to see that happen with these. Okay?
Yeah, with that, yeah?
I would be willing to move that back, to duplicate the other window opening, and to come back, if you would approve this project, and come back on consent to add grills in at a later date. This being final moved along, and we'll revisit grills at a later time under separate cover.
I don't need the grills myself. If you have the separate window, I'd be fine with it. I mean, if you have the double.
I need the grills.
He needs them.
Okay, and we'd be happy to look at that. And
But as
so,
a separate submittal.
okay, so what we're looking at is a window over here, like this one, underneath the recessed. Okay, recessed doors and windows. I'm just stating it so for the motion maker, and that they come back. We give them preliminary. I mean, we give them what they need, and they go on to consent for coming back for the grills. So
We're hoping.
Could we get a final approval without the grills right now?
I think we can if staff is willing to take revised drawings across the counter, because in other words, we could draw in here what we're approving by pen, but they would have to come and give you an updated drawing with those windows so that they could have it in their file. Okay?
Yep.
So if I'm right,
You name it, we'll do it.
and this should be recessed. This is a molding that goes around, or you have that, or you don't have that in the latest incarnation?
Yes. It
You do have-
exists up here. It's very subtle.
Okay.
So we're
Can I have
Right
that?
off the building.
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Can I make a motion?
Yeah, you can. And, okay.
Okay, the motion is final approval with the change that on the east elevation, the small window is to match the adjacent window. And then the second sentence is the applicant has the opportunity
How much
to
can we
submit
redress?
grills for the windows on Melpis at a later date if he desires to do so. And the third thing is the door on Melpis is to be recessed back from the plane of the walls by how many inches?
Under discussion, if you were just to say that both the windows and the doors are to be recessed.
The door's already
The
recessed
doors
Okay.
also recess the windows
to match the door.
to match the doors. Sorry.
Okay, so then that third sentence, Kathy, is to say,
Recess the windows.
okay, the two new windows along Melpis are to be recessed in the same dimension as the proposed door on the Melpis elevation.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Any more under discussion? You happy with landscape? Okay. So all those in favor of the motion as noted? Or seconded, sorry, seconded by Clay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So,
Chair, I just want to clarify that if the applicant has some grills, it will be called a review after final. Even if we don't charge them for that, that would be we're giving them final approval.
it'll be a review after final. Yeah. And that should be able to go straight to consent.
This will allow us to get into the building department with what we have here.
Understand. So we keep this. Darrell, good to see you again. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Tracy?
Thanks, Clay.
All right. So this is the one we keep.
I need the plan substitution form to be filled out because it wasn't the plan that we had.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Sorry.
You just need to put what change you submitted the.
So are we taking these then? You don't need any of these?
You could have that one. We took the marked up one. See you, Derek.
Moving right along.
Okay. We're at item number 2 here, 810 Bond Avenue. And they only give us 20 minutes.
Okay.
So,
Want us to start?
I guess we need the drawings. 810 Bond Avenue. Sorry, Joanne. Baptism of fire, right?
This is a memo from the planner.
Okay.
Because you need substantial compliance.
Okay. Kathleen Kennedy.
No, this one.
Middle with the photos all.
Okay. So while you're going there, I'm just going to read a note here from the planner.
Okay.
Kathleen Kennedy, the associate planner with the project, says that the Planning Commission approved a condominium conversion project with the following condition of approval. Open space area. Applicant shall install 2 planters with a tree in each on the western property line near the uncovered parking spaces, and a raised planter and or bench in the open space area shown on the approved plans with the final design to be determined by the ABR, except that the final design shall include a 24-inch box tree planted in the ground. The applicant is now requesting that the requirement for a 24-inch box tree planted in the ground be eliminated. Okay. At the Planning Commission hearing, there was much discussion regarding removal of a portion of the concrete to provide additional landscaping. The applicant has since provided a letter from the contractor stating that cutting into the existing concrete slab would compromise its structural integrity. Staff is in support of removing this requirement from the condition of approval because the ABR has provided direction to the applicant requiring additional landscaping consistent with staff and commissioners' concerns. Staff requests input from the Planning Commission on this request prior to making a determination regarding substantial conformance. Okay. And let's see.
And then
Yes. And you should pass that on to Carol too, because a lot of it is landscaping. So the last time you were here, if I'm right,
May 4th?
3 sets. May 4th?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We have 9 items on the motion. The landscape proposal is not acceptable as presented. The board would prefer a solution where in-ground landscaping is achieved. Professional landscaping architect to suggest above-ground plantings. Provide a specimen tree somewhere on site. Provide bumper stops for parking spaces. Provide landscaping in the parkway on Nopal and Bond Streets. Landscape plan to incorporate all existing walls on site. Provide screening or separation of the outdoor living space from the adjacent parking. Study the configuration of the outdoor living space to make it more usable. Okay. So let's go with your presentation.
Great. My name is Steve Oroz with Oroz Engineering Group. I'm the agent for the owner, Peter Curls, who's in the audience. And to follow up with the history on this a little bit, from Kathleen's memo, we did go to the Planning Commission with this plan to get a substantial conformity determination, which was given, so that the condition for the 24-inch box tree in the ground in this outdoor living area was waived and is back to your board for clarification and direction on, so we have one person to listen to, you guys.
Okay.
So that was the last part of that memo that wasn't in that discussion. And that meeting with the Planning Commission was about 3 weeks ago. Peter Lawson was the planner there. And he was planning to be here at 4, but I'm not sure if he's still around. So what I'd like to do is let David Black with David Black Associates Landscape Architecture follow through on these 9 items. and hopefully seek final approval this afternoon.
Okay, I'm David Black. So the plan before you represents revised design that we anticipate will meet all the comments that were given at the last meeting. Just to give you a reference, this is the site, as you may remember, in the corner of Bond and Nopal, and you can see it's well landscaped, and I don't think there was any concern about how well the existing project is. And here it is down Bond.
Right.
Now, what we showed you the last time was this layout, and there were some issues around the space perhaps wasn't large enough. The pots and trellis elements that are shown here didn't provide enough separation from the parking for this common open space. And so what we've done then is the following. We've expanded, and you have to appreciate the fact that we are dealing with a parking lot on a slab that we can't penetrate, and that there are existing parking stalls which we're not going to encroach into. So there's a stall here and there's a big handicap stall here. So the photographs there showed paving just in a simple rectangle here. We've expanded the paving out here, or will, and then we've met the need for a specimen box tree by putting it outside the wall in a planter here. It's a little tight to the existing jacaranda, but be that as it may, we're proposing that it be planted here. And then to create separation between the parking and this little patio space, if you will, we are proposing freestanding redwood planter boxes with lath screen, and not unlike what you see in this photograph here. They'd obviously have to be braced, and they'd be fully planted as represented by this plan here. So you'd have some sense of enclosure. The whole apparatus, if you will, the screen fencing would be 5 feet high off the deck, and so you'd have planting in the boxes, and then we'd have vines. In this particular case, a passion flower, which would pretty much cover up this little lath screen, with an opening, a 4-foot opening off the handicap space here. In addition, we are proposing mixed succulents, pretty much Echeveria and Crassula ground cover in this existing DG, both on Bond and Nopal Street. The ceramic pots that you see in those photographs would just be integrated in amongst here. We don't feel like there's a lot of really colorful planting, cannas and what have you against this existing wall, and so we feel like this would be sort of a nice backdrop to this space. I mean, it's a difficult space to work with. We're somewhat constrained, but I think it's a vast improvement over having nothing there, which is what this board approved early on.
Yeah, at our first
meeting through here. So we felt like it's going to provide nice separation, relatively nice space given the physical dimension constraints, and I think we've met. Yeah, the walls are shown on site graphically; they weren't shown before, and with patio furniture, and then a bench provided by the owner.
Okay, are you providing a specimen tree somewhere on site?
That's this one.
That's the new one?
That's the one I just spoke
and
about.
that
Okay.
one is in native ground.
Yes,
And-
24-inch
okay.
box.
And you have your bumper stops for parking?
Well, I don't show them on the plan, but there will be bumper stops if I have to draw them in. But
Okay, so, yeah.
in addition to that, there are 2 box trees here, Leland cypresses, that the owner had already provided, which are shown in those photographs.
Okay. Okay. Just bringing it in the presentation. You have anything more?
No, that concludes.
We'll take a look and make sure we covered points there.
I see your plan is here. Do you want to... you had anything to say, Peter? Nothing to add?
No. I think we had a question on was the substantial determination at the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair, we did go to the Planning Commission for substantial conforming determination, and Planning Commission was fine with the change, the condition about not putting a tree in the ground. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. Okay, also, just the end of presentation. Anyone in the public to speak on this project? Seeing no one, I'll close public comment and also say that we acknowledge a letter from Paula Westbury on the project. Okay, then, bringing it back to the board, I'd like to start with Carol, since this is really a strong realm and we come this way.
So I do have a question, gentlemen. It appears from your parking layout that this area of the pavement could be incorporated into part of your landscape solution. It just seems to be such a wasted little corner there. Is there a reason why we're pushing the landscaping along the edge and not really looking at where the parking layout is?
Well, the limit of that particular stall is here. I suppose you could open it up, but from my perspective, are you talking about expanding the patio to include that space?
No, just more landscaping.
That's part of the deck that we can't plant. Oh.
That's deck.
It's all deck.
Okay, so your solution here is above ground planters.
Yes.
Okay, why not custom make a planter that has, that is, so there could be landscaping introduced there?
Well, here's a picture of that area.
Mm-hmm.
There's this wall which has been landscaped, has been there.
Mm-hmm.
This is the area that would be expanded with the plan before us that we were given direction. There was talk of a wheel stop in this area somewhere.
Right.
And one of the issues is that if we start closing this off too much, cars will shy away, and this could back up into here and create some difficulties with parking. I can appreciate the need for this void in here, and possibly there might be a way to put one of the pots or two out in here, something to give it a little more color and landscape, but with giving some flexibility for the automobile to negotiate the stall.
And I have to say too that our objective in this exercise was really to kind of create a common space here, and the fact that we're screening it off from the parking was your direction anyway. I don't know what that really contributes. I mean, it's like saying, well, why don't you make these planters larger too? Really, what our objective was to kind of create a nice passive space for users here. And the other thing too is when you talk about constructing a planter, then there's issues with, I don't know if you're talking about...
It could be just a big pot. Pots come in different sizes.
We have no problem with putting a big pot
big
there.
oval pot or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have two of them here, so we can just put another one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My second question is, so there's a 4-foot-high screen here. Do you feel that this is going to interfere with the door opening? Because this dimension is the requirement for the stall.
Correct.
So, how do you open up this door, the car door?
Want me to?
Go ahead.
I'll start, and then we'll go from there. Typically, in a parking garage, you would have an extra foot next to a wall for the parking stall. The idea of this trellis area is that I believe these are 12 or 18 inches wide.
Yes.
And that the trellis itself would be 9 inches or so off of this space here. So we're pretty close to that foot now. These could very easily be pushed back 6 inches or a foot away from the edge of the parking stall, which would provide that area for the car door to open very easily.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you have enough play to kind of the stall that can move over here, because this is sort of a space here, isn't it?
It's geometry of the angles. It starts to get...
Well, as long, I buy that as long as the height of this doesn't interfere with the door opening, because there's nothing worse than trying to get out of your car and you just can't.
Right. Yeah.
I understand.
And this is approximately 12 inches tall, so it's a tall curb in most respects.
Okay, thank you.
Comment? Paul? Ray?
Carol, is that it for questions?
Questions.
Okay, so are we going?
Questions? And then when we hit Keith, we'll come back
I'll
to
phrase
comments.
mine in the form of a question then. Kind of like Jeopardy. This is a jacaranda, and then we're adding a new jacaranda here, and forgive me for not being a landscape architect, but is there any issues? Do we have enough room to do all this, or would another tree selection be more appropriate for that spot?
We could probably use another tree. There might be an issue.
That's the end of my questions.
Good. Keith?
No questions. I'll just jump into comments. I think, I think the applicant's done a lot with all the constraints that they had and responded to all the comments we had last time. They've screened the area. They've added the in-ground tree and expanded the space. So I think this is ready for approval today.
Thanks. Clay?
My only comment would be maybe consider another tree if that's up. I'll let Carol address that.
Great. Thanks. Paul? Carol?
My comments are, I think you had satisfied the nature of our concerns last time. So I think this, this is what we were looking for. My comment, however, is I'm trying to imagine, it almost feels like kind of going into, with this lattice being 4 feet tall, I don't know how, I think that the opening, the 4-foot opening going in as sort of a passage walkway should really be wider in order to just not feel like you're going into a small cage, sort of. I think that, where's that picture of the lattice? Maybe if some more, design, instead of just like a flat top, there are some lattices that every panel has a little design to it, where you just sort of make it feel, and I hate to even say this, but almost like an enclosed little English garden where the hard elements are just as important as the soft elements, because just those straight panels, to me, it almost sets up a feeling like you're in a pen, a cage, instead of being inside something that is really attractive to look at. But you know what? We can't really see this from the street. So I think as an ABR member reviewing this, I think the public is so minimally affected by the choices that you're making inside your parking lot. You do have a mature tree that we're looking at once we look inside. So I'm just kind of thinking, I think in your design elements, you could have gone maybe a little further to just try to incorporate a more pleasant environment for the users. But David, I'm really going to say I think this is fine. And if you want to propose an alternative tree to Clay's concern, you're welcome to do that, but I just think that you could have put one more layer of thinking into it for the user.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Just to make you feel better, I think you're sort of looking at this without benefit of the proposal to cover this complete with vines. So essentially it's a green wall, a flowering green wall at that. So I think that goes a long ways toward, really creating a nice environment for the people inside there. I mean, to look at this, I would agree by itself, in and of itself, but the fact that it's going to be covered with a flowering vine, and I mean thick, I think would more than meet your concerns from my perspective.
Okay. I have no further comments.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion
Yes, Keith.
for final approval as submitted.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second. Under discussion.
I'd like the applicants to add another planter. Do we have the parking stalls numbered, or how do we?
At the angled spot.
Okay. Add another pot with planting. And David, I know you're going to do something good there, but I think that is an opportunity that hasn't been explored. So add one more pot at angled parking stall. Is that okay?
Sounds good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, can I,
Yes, Joanne?
that's final approval now with condition or with a change, not final as submitted if we're adding a plan? Final approval with condition?
This is final approval with condition.
With one condition. Yeah.
With one condition.
If it could be as shown, and then David could actually just make a note and then put that plan into the staff? Okay,
You
right,
can do that right now, yeah. And then I'll change it to as shown.
right.
Great.
Very good. Okay, so number... Where am I? Sorry, Paul. Thanks for the... Okay, number 3, 505 Wentworth Avenue.
You have 10 minutes.
505 Wentworth Avenue. Thank you. Sorry? Yeah, to me, because that's how the TV shows it here. See how it flips back on the screen? So we have a PC resolution.
Yes. Staff hearing officer.
Okay. Staff hearing officer.
And that was,
Okay, if you could state your name and no, this is Los Olivos. Oh, Wentworth is underneath. Okay, just now. Let me find.
thank you.
Okay. Where's my... Okay, so we had what, 7 items? Is that it? Your last time here was 3rd of December?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read the items quickly here. Continued indefinitely to PC and return to full board. Several board members are concerned that all buildings are too aggressive. They share the public's concern and prefer not to have modifications in exchange for height and mass. 2, some board members are concerned with the inadequate parking, the lack of guest parking. There is concern with the lack of significant 1- and 2-story building presence to the street to blend into the neighboring structures, providing neighborhood compatibility. There is concern that keeping the original apartment building may contribute to the aggressive site design, and the new building may help achieve a less aggressive site design. It was suggested removing the trash enclosure away from the southeast setback. The overall site plan is well executed. The open space and amenities are appreciated. The board appreciates the articulation of facades, especially the dormer 3rd-story elements nestled into the 2nd-story roof. The applicant is encouraged to return to the full board prior to going to PC.
You're reading the correct date?
March 24th was the last one, sorry. That
March
was previous to the last.
Oh, I just asked you if that was December 3rd.
I'm sorry, I just looked at my notes because
This is 2008.
This is new. This is in the reverse
7.
order.
Oh, this is in the reverse. Goes all the way to here then. I wonder if this is it here. This is a PC. This is like a full-on. This is a PC.
June 16th, 08?
March 24th.
March 24th.
09?
Yes. Oh, 08.
Was that long ago?
Yes. It took us.
This is March 18th. There's a March 18th.
And there's a June.
And then there's a June 16th. No, there's a June 16th.
Because the last comments that I have were to
Okay, there must be stuff along
Third concept review.
I'm sorry.
June 16th, third concept review.
Maybe you have them.
See,
Joanne has them.
here's the last one that I have, which
put it at the wrong address.
yeah, this one is the one that says to go to for SHO.
But I have a Wentworth underneath here too. And then I think this one belongs to, this is Wentworth, and I think this one is the other project. Oh, this is Wentworth too. Okay. All right. So 24th of March. Okay. Provide a 36 to 48 inch box tree in the front yard. At the street elevation, provide a greater distance between the columns at the porch and the adjacent wall. 5 feet is suggested. On the north elevation, refine the post-to-beam connection at the entrances of the 2 rear units. At front unit on the north elevation, refine the fascia board member as it touches the main portion of the building at the 2nd story. On the floor plan, show the railing at the front porch of the front unit. Provide a color board, exterior lighting information, and architectural details. Okay.
That was much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Was at least as partial the architect.
Go ahead.
And here, this is the tree that was provided.
Okay.
And
So this is the new tree that you're providing here?
yes.
Okay. Yeah. This is the PC, I think.
It should be.
PC
It's towards the end. It's yeah.
I just want to start Xing out these things.
It's this tree that was added. And what is the size?
In a 36 to 48 inch box tree in the front yard.
What is the symbol?
Just a circle.
Geobio, Geranium cantabriginese. The size is not on here. Should we just write that in?
Let's move on.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's still to happen.
I'll have to check with that.
Okay.
Landscape.
At the street elevation, provide a greater distance between the columns at the porch and the adjacent wall. 5 feet is suggested.
Okay, we were able to go to 4 foot 10 inches. And if I can show you on the elevation.
Between the columns at the porch. Between? So you have like outside dimension?
So let's look at it inside elevation,
Yeah.
which is we got in here.
Yeah. So we're looking for this distance here
Yeah.
inside to be 5 feet from here to in here, not the outside, from here to here. So that you can use the porch, you know.
Okay, yeah, I was able to get 4 foot 10
I think you're 4 foot 10 to the outside.
to
of
the
car.
outside, but not to the inside. I do show the rails.
Okay, on the north elevation, refine the post-to-beam connections at the entrances of the 2 rear units. These
Those are the
here.
yes.
You have a detail of that, 22.9.
18 and 22 on 9.
Yeah. 18.
And
So that's a
22.
different one. 22 here.
So here, this is the
What's
the beam and this is actually showing the end, you know, the mitering of the end of the beams, but this is the detail, and we're going to do the drift pins so that, you know, you don't have any buckets
exterior
for that. And what we're doing is we're going to flush frame it so that it comes back, so that it's a nice clean detail.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry. And then this shows the decking underneath, so that when you're, you know, underneath the overhang, at where the porch occurs on the back unit, you have you know, something nice to look at instead of just the raw 2x.
Okay. At front unit on the north elevation, we find the fascia board member as it touches the main portion of the building at the second story. And then I think it's right here.
Yes. What I did was I brought it back 6 inches so that it wraps back around.
How much does it come this way? All
That's
this
6 inches.
Okay, on the floor plan, show the railing at the front porch of the front unit. Okay, you did that. Provide a color board.
That's right underneath that. And also the
Just
light
this
fixture.
one?
And the light fixture.
And the light fixture. So we have a color board and a light fixture. The body is this color, Gale's Garden.
Yes, we have 2 body colors. The darker, which is the Gale's Garden, is the siding, and then with the shingle, it's the
Grassdale.
upper, the Grassdale, a little bit lighter color.
And the windows are this.
They're the Anderson white. And then the trim will also be a white, and that's
Zebra and stripe.
Yeah.
Zebra stripe.
Yeah, which is that was the nicest white that I could find.
Okay.
I don't know why they call it zebra stripe, but
Okay. A Royal Craftsman light fixture. Okay. So we have acknowledge a letter from Paula Westbury. Anyone in the public would like to comment on this project? Step forward. Seeing no one, I'll close that portion. Bring it back to the board for questions. Keith?
No questions.
Clay?
I don't have a question.
Paul?
Just one. If we look at the floor plan for the front unit, were you able to achieve the 5 feet that was requested? And
Yeah.
if not, what was the damage to the plan if that was to occur?
we were able to get 410. The stairwell starts to almost eliminate our ability to have this deck upstairs, and
Show us the second floor.
so you know we've got a 5-foot door there going out to this deck, and that was about as tight as we could get it.
And what's preventing this wall from sliding over further?
It starts to go over the garage door, so that or I'm sorry, is that the right?
Yeah.
Well,
It's over the garage door. Right?
It's over the garage door, but it starts to crowd this element. Right now we've got almost equal distance. It just felt that it felt crowded. I mean, if the concern is the space, I don't know if it might take away too much from the front, but eliminating the rail might be.
No, that wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
That would make it worse, I think. The concern is that it's so small that it's not usable, and then it becomes not viewed as usable either. Even if you don't use it, it doesn't look like a usable porch because you can barely sit down there with a chair, and your feet will not be able to stretch out.
If the board feels strongly, I can try to get more dimension there.
Other questions, Paul?
Nope, that was it.
Carol?
I do have a couple landscape questions, but I think that the landscape architect is the one to answer it. So I'll just form it as comments
Okay.
later.
Okay.
Okay. Comments? Keith?
Let's see. I think the applicants addressed all the previous comments regarding the front porch depth. I think that's kind of a balance, as Jose said, between the kind of crowding that bay window upstairs, and I think maybe he could just study the detailing of the railing there, so maybe you can cheat a couple inches somehow. Maybe it's slightly proud of the railing's proud of the columns. But other than that, I think it's ready for preliminary approval.
Okay. Clay? Paul?
I would agree with that. It's ready for preliminary approval, but there's still going to be a little more exercise done to sort of make that front porch a little more usable in the detailing one way or another.
Okay, and Carol, you're reserving comment?
So I have a couple comments that are landscape, and I'll just show you, and they could go in the motion.
Okay.
Let's see, where's the landscape plan again? It's back here. Okay. So they're just minor, but I think we need to pay attention to it. Looking at how the sidewalk jogs around like this, having a ground cover here, I think, is going to disappear in a very short amount of time. I think what a person is going to do is cut this corner off. So I suggest that these are agapanthus, and that at least like an agapanthus Peter Pan, the smaller variety, something needs to be filled in here that is full enough that is going to deter a person from just cutting through here. Otherwise, I think it'll just look like dirt. The second comment is having these two pyrus so close together is not going to be successful. So I want to ask the landscape architect to revisit the species in order to have a tree that is actually this size shown in the circle. No, I'm talking about at maturity. These trees, just one tree will exceed what those two canopies are drawn as. So, the species of the trees, if they're going to be two, and the front yard has to be revisited. The third comment is, and this is just a little error that I'm sure was overlooked, but the tree in the back, which is labeled AGGRA, is not identified on the legend. And do we have a detail for the front fence? Do we know what that's, not yet?
I don't believe we have a detail yet.
We'll look forward to what that looks like.
I'm looking at doing a picket fence.
Where it's more open.
Yes.
Okay.
And, actually, it's been long enough that maybe we should look at the details, see if I, because I had something very clearly in mind.
You're
No.
taking those down, Kathleen?
No, I didn't. I didn't draw it.
Okay.
Okay, do you want me to repeat what I said, or location? Okay, so the three landscape comments would be, in front yard, the portion of the planter that is intruding into the sidewalk shall have plants large enough so it would deter people from cutting through the planter. The second comment is the 2 trees that are proposed within 20 feet of each other in the front yard shall be different species of trees than what is proposed due to size at maturity. And the third one is, and just say, please note that the tree in the backyard, which is identified as AG, and then a space, GRA is not on the legend. Okay, that's it.
Okay. And my comments really are like Paul's. I think that you need to make this an usable patio, and that's really all I have concern-wise about the project. So I'll welcome a motion from anyone. Yes, Keith.
I'll make a motion. Move for preliminary approval with the following comments. 1, the applicant is to study making the front porch space more usable, and then the 3 landscape comments that Carol had that I won't repeat.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second by Carol. Under discussion, would the motion maker, instead of saying study, if we can revert back to at least where we were, saying a minimum of 5 feet clear? Or
sure.
Is that all right? So a minimum of 5 feet clear from the guardrail would suffice for me. Is that all right?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Joanne.
You need to make the findings that it complies with the staff hearing officer resolutions.
Mr. Chair, I looked at each one of these, and the only one I didn't see is a screen check valve backflow.
Do you have a? Let's have a look at that.
I didn't see it on the site plan or the landscape plan.
Backflow device. Here it
I
is in
believe
here.
so.
Here's the backflow device. It's right between those 2 trees that you were talking about. IRR backflow RP device. It's actually right at the base of one of the trees.
Yeah. So if you feel that it's screened enough.
It could be screened if they have this positioned as shown. Maybe the landscape architect could put a note that says final positioning of plants around backflow preventer shall be approved by landscape architect prior to planting for optimal screening.
Okay, so that gets in the motion. Okay, that's it for the discussion. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
This motion was preliminary back to
Final on consent.
final on consent. Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
We don't need this. Yes,
Thank you.
this. Thanks very much. Okay, our last item of the evening, 505 West Los Olivos Street. Let's wrap this puppy up. Okay. We need to.
Is there any difference between these and the colored ones?
No. We just added color and...
Yeah, these are colored.
Just the
That's
color.
the only difference.
No change. Okay.
It's on the record, he spoke it.
He spoke it. He spoke it. Okay. So let's see. Do we have this is for continued item. So that means we have some minutes here. Let's have a look. Condo conversion. This is it here. All activities summary or this one. Case summary. Okay, we had 11 items. So you were here last on 16th of June, 2008.
Sounds right.
Is that right? You had 11 items?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are the minutes I'm working off of.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, I wonder if I should quickly read through. Maybe, would you like
we
to
can
proceed through, walk through them?
We'll walk through
Okay,
our
'cause there's
responses.
Quite a long list here.
Yeah, it would be easier to do that. Proceed?
Proceed, Teddy.
I'm Deddy Pikert, Pikert Group Architects.
I'm Bonnie Sangster, Packard Group Architects.
Okay, and yeah, so as you pointed out, we were here quite a while ago, more than a year now. But in the course of that time, the project kind of slowly moved forward through the process, and on June 4th, received Planning Commission approvals. And so at this time, we're here today for preliminary approval so that we can move forward with the working drawings, completion of the working drawings. What I'd like to do is, there are a couple of things. There are some comments in your 11 points here, some of which don't require comments.
Sorry, Daddy.
Sorry, they were asking if you could speak up in the audience.
Sure. Yeah, I'll speak up a little. Some of the 11 points don't really require comments because they're simply appreciating some of the changes that we had made in a previous meeting. There are also, at the Planning Commission approval, there were a couple of comments that the planning commissioners made that we have addressed here that were really advisory for you to be aware of. And so I'm just going to walk through these one by one.
Okay.
So the first couple of points here from your minutes, from the ABR minutes, refer to a setback. I'm going to flip to the site plan here. So.
Yeah, I'll read it. The board finds that the modification setback at the front unit on Los Olivos Street does not pose a negative aesthetic impact. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Does not pose.
Correct. And at that time, we were proposing a 13-foot setback and asking for a modification from a 15-foot setback because we had actually taken the first unit here and made it a two-story unit, change it from a three-bedroom to a two-bedroom, making it a two-story element here. But the zoning code specifically has regulations that require approximately 50% or 50% of the floor area on the third floor, or no more than 50% on the third floor in order to allow for a two-story setback, which would have been 10 feet. We'd already set it back 13 feet. The Planning Commission was concerned about the setback as a matter of principle there, the modification as a matter of principle, and asked us to achieve a 15-foot setback or make a design change which would have required us to move one of these units over to this building, making that a 5-unit building and this a 3-unit building. And all along, when we described this to you previously, we didn't really want to do that. We felt it was more appropriate to have the smaller scale buildings and not have a 5-unit building. So that was the reason for the setback request. However, at the Planning Commission, they still wanted us to maintain that, doing that either way. So we kind of took a real careful look at the plans to see if we could squeeze out 2 feet somewhere, and then we managed to do that in the buildings themselves. So we were able to get 2 more feet and meet that 15-foot setback and leave the basic configuration of the buildings that you saw the same as they were when you saw them last. So 2 4-unit buildings back here with this gap in between.
Okay.
So that's how that was addressed. And then in your comment number 3, you had made the suggestion that we take where we have the trash enclosure, which are attached to the enclosures which are attached to the buildings,
and move one side over to the other side. I think, maybe it's Unit 7.
I'll just read that for the
Sure.
for the public. The board recommends that the center area between the two 4-unit buildings have enclosed trash and recycling containers located adjacent to Unit 7, allowing a perceived courtyard in front of the guest parking area and allowing a larger open space between the two buildings. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here.
Right. And as you can see from the drawing here, it really wasn't feasible to do that because we needed to add a little electrical cabinet there. And furthermore, it would have placed this trash right next to this parking space, and there just wasn't enough room to not have a conflict between the parking and the trash, opening the doors and people bringing in their bins and potentially damaging or scratching a car or something that might be parked there. So we retained them where they were originally, but they do have a low roof on them, which basically encloses the trash so that it and it's only obviously on the first story where you see that. And I think somewhere in here we have do we have a rendering of that, of a view? In the second sheet of these colored renderings, it kind of shows a view from the driveway, and you can see the low roof over the trash enclosure here and the passageway between.
Okay, so where is that though? Where's that green space?
That's behind. That's in the planting area behind against the property line there.
That's back here.
Looking back here. Yeah.
Oh, I think they put flowers where there would be a parking space, but it would be beyond.
Because this parking space would be right there now, right?
Yeah. Right, and that
Okay.
would be
That's correct.
grass creek parking space.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. That's just incorrectly rendered there. There's no trellis being proposed.
There's a small trellis of the mailbox.
Oh, in front. That's correct.
Where is that on front of you?
And here?
Yeah, you see it? Yeah.
Where that perspective is.
Right. Right. You're looking down sort of through that driveway. At the
Okay.
buildings there.
Should I read 4 before you go on to that?
Sure. Go ahead.
Number 4, the board finds no aesthetic impact to having a roof over the trash enclosure, although it triggers a modification request for separation distance between buildings. The roof is preferable and is not a negative aesthetic impact.
Yeah, the
So-
Planning Commission agreed with that
Okay.
in terms of the modifications.
So you got your mod for that?
Yeah.
Okay. 5, the massing of the project with the 2-story portions on the streets blending into the neighborhood is appreciated. That's study lowering the first and second floor plate heights.
So on that score, one of the things that the commission was looking at was the 2-story duplex here, and I guess the roofs went up fairly high, and they wanted us to look at lowering the roof height. So we redesigned that and lowered the overall height of the building by about 3 to 4 feet, a little more than, or just a little less than 4 feet. So substantially lower just by simply redesigning the building, and you'll be able to see the elevations in there in the package. And then we also lowered the ground level plate.
The second.
Or not in this one, the second story plate to 8 feet in this building.
Do you have a section through that you could show us?
You have elevation of the front.
Or elevation with...
Yeah, and there's an elevation in the colored package there as well. Maybe I can flip to that first so you can see what that looks like.
That's it.
So there's the front elevation. Previously, the roof went up quite a bit higher here, so we just redesigned it and simplified it a little bit. And that's the front elevation of that building. And then this is the side elevation of the building with the front entrance for Unit 2.
You have a section through that or we can look at?
What sheet that's on?
Sorry.
Section?
We have sections that's larger.
Okay, we don't have a section at this point through this building. But
What are
yeah, the plates are 9 feet at the ground floor where you have a living and kitchen area, and then 8 feet at the second floor. Previously, there were 9 feet on the second floor, so we
what's
dropped the
the
plate.
floor thickness height?
I think it's
We've allowed 14 inches.
14 inches. Yeah. Okay, so I think that sort of relates to overall reduction. We reduced the plates a little bit on these buildings as well, as much as was feasible. We had 9'9" originally for the ground level. We had this bedroom here, so we changed that to an 8-foot plate, but the garage drops down and slopes. So overall, I think it ends up being 8'9", whereas it was 9'9" before. So we dropped the plate there, and there's some sections that I can show you of that building later on. So we talked about plate. That's point number 6. Number 7.
Said the board would prefer to see the Los Olivos Street entry to Unit 10 redesigned to include more substantial architectural elements for a more pedestrian-friendly entrance.
Okay. And we did do, and again, there's an elevation in this package, a colored one. Was it sheet number 5? We're obviously kind of limited with what we can do to articulate there. We have the ability to have a 2-foot encroachment, non-habitable type space or protrusions from the building into that setback, but beyond that, that's about all we could do. So what we did was we cut out a little piece of the building here at the corner, making that entry element a 1-story little piece there. And then we created a bay window here in the middle that's at the top of the stairs, so creating kind of a big, large window that cantilevers out a couple of feet, or about a foot, I think, 1 foot exactly. And then we have a 2-foot roof overhang. So we didn't have a lot of ability to maneuver there, but I think it does kind of scale down the building, appearance from the street by cutting that corner out of it. And just working with the window placement. Of course, the garage wall is facing the street, so we have a couple of windows into the garage there.
Okay.
Moving along.
So number 8, there is concern with the number of third-story dormers. The board appreciates the dormers nestling into the roof, but would prefer more variety of styles, such as gables, hips, and shed roof styles.
So again, the third-story dormers are set back from the edge in order to kind of create a kind of a 2.5-story appearance. And we did change some of the dormers, and you'll be able to see those in the elevations. But in this rendering, you can see that we added some shed dormers in the middle, and then we cut back the gable at the end dormers in order to just soften the overall appearance there. And if we go to this is a typical elevation there of the 4-story. Here you can see the 2 end gables with the truncated gable, and then the shed gables in the middle.
Okay. Number 9. Some board members would like to see the building articulated in a more townhouse-like style to delineate the courtyard feeling between the units and for added variety.
Yeah, that was something that really, we played around with how to do that, but it just really wasn't. There's not enough room on the site to offset the units to create, the usual technique that one might implement to get that effect, offsetting the individual units, but it just created chaos in the roof planes and with the dormers and everything, and so that just wasn't something that we could do.
Okay. The use of sustainable concepts is appreciated. The use of permeable pavers and the guest parking is preferred. The 19% outdoor landscape area, retention of all existing oak trees, and the introduction of additional planting on site are appreciated. So do we have the permeable pavers and guest parking?
Yeah.
Actually, all of the driveway is permeable, and
So the whole driveway
guest
now.
is grass-free.
Okay. And board appreciates the applicant working with the neighbors to resolve issues. Okay.
And I was going to add, unfortunately, our landscape architect wasn't able to make it. We were hoping that Katie would be. But we welcome any comments that you have on the landscape plan.
Okay, are you going to show us what else is in this?
Yeah, I'll walk you through this. It's just various floor plans that really haven't substantively changed, just minor adjustments based on the changes that we made overall. But essentially the same. These are then the hard line CAD elevations that reflect basically what you're looking at in the color elevations, but without the entourage. And there you see the floor to floor heights, etc. Floor thicknesses, overall building height. Here are some sections. And again, the same building heights that are reflected on those elevations show up here again.
Sorry.
Oops.
Okay.
Yeah, these are the elevations.
Sorry. Right. So this is the general setback of all of your dormers here from the floor below.
Yeah.
What is that? 2 feet, 3 feet, or 2'6" or? They look like they may vary. This one looks a little bit more than this one.
They are symmetric on the front and the back. We actually pulled those in a little bit since the last. The roof over the balconies, at a distance.
Yeah, I just can't tell you about a scale off the top of my head here what that distance is, but it looks like it's about just a little over 2 feet.
Okay, maybe when you come back, you'll be able to tell us what that is.
We'll
there.
give you the exact dimension.
This only happens on an interior dormer,
Right.
is that right?
Well, it happens on. First of all, the duplex, which is 2-story, has no third-story elements.
Uh-huh.
Then on the front building that faces the other street, the first unit is 2-story, and then the other units have that dormer element. And then the back building, which is nestled into the back corner of the site, it has dormers for all 4 of the units.
Okay, could you point out where that happens?
As a matter of fact, this roof plan is a good way to see
Okay.
it. Here you see there aren't any third-story elements. There's no third-story element here, and then you've got it here, the back of that building, these 3 units, and then these 4 units over here.
Okay, and the shed dormers happen where?
In the middle.
Right here, only here.
South side.
Just on.
Yeah.
Yeah, just these 2 here.
Yeah.
Not there actually on where the
On
bathroom.
this side here. Okay. Oh, so here's a shed dormer here too?
Sorry.
No, I think these are the sheds, right?
Okay.
Yeah, facing into the courtyard.
Yeah. Because
Same thing
these
with
are
the
this
one
here.
here, right?
Yeah, there are also kind of sheds between south side.
Okay.
Yeah, on the
Let's
south
keep
side.
going
Both
here.
sides have the sheds. This is the existing building and the modifications that are proposed for that. It doesn't really change the architecture significantly. It's just
These
a
are the
little bit of
existing
it.
buildings?
Yeah. There's one existing apartment building.
Highlighted areas or changes.
Okay. And you're talking about this later when you have... Okay. So, just before we bring it to the board, do we have a letter from Paula Westbury?
Yes, I gave it to you with the document.
Yes, we do. Yeah, thanks. Very good. So I'd like to acknowledge a letter from Paula Westbury, and then anyone from the public would like to comment on this project, please. We have one person. Could you step forward? You can use this chair too, I guess. Just push the middle button. Did you fill out a speaker slip?
I will get you a speaker slip. I have not done so.
Okay, so you maybe fill one out right after.
Okay. My name is Ralph Philbrick. I'm at 510 West Los Olivos Street, directly across the street. And I've attended all of these meetings. I'm not quite sure where the formal list of requirements, suggestion, topics comes from, because I sat through that meeting and made my notes, and they were pretty different from that. That must be generated by the staff after the hearing.
Well, this would be the motion that was at the last meeting that we had here in June of 2008.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Well, it surprises me, the language there, but that might become apparent. Thank you very much for accommodating Los Olivos Street with the 15-foot setback. That's one of the things that we've been asking for, is the maximum possible setback there. And for Unit 10, which is on Los Olivos Street, why could there not be a 3 or 4 foot reduction in height there, the way you provided on Oak Park Lane?
Is that a question I should answer, Mr. Chair? Or wait
no,
until
you could address us.
Yes.
And then we will bring it up with the applicant.
Okay, okay. So that is my question. Why could the applicant not lower Unit 10 the 3 or 4 feet as is being provided for the unit on Oak Park Lane?
Okay.
And specifically on the 15-foot setback from Los Olivos Street, if you could please show on the plans how that would help with the view and privacy issues of the Wooford property, just to the freeway side, the creek side of this development.
Say again.
with this resident?
Yes.
To this resident. So
Yes.
you're asking how is the benefit?
Right. In other words, I'm not sure. 15 feet will help from the atmosphere for the neighborhood.
Sure.
Will 15 feet at all help from the second-story people looking right down into his windows, which is an issue? He has family medical problems today, otherwise he would be here. But I would like to be able to take back to him some information. I'm doubtful that 15 feet helps, which again puts more emphasis on the desirability of Unit 10 being lowered. So how does this 15-foot setback on Los Olivos Street improve the Wooford property view and privacy issues?
Okay.
And finally, the one-story entranceway for Unit 10, that seems like a very small element of Unit 10. I would appreciate knowing the dimensions of that to get an idea of, how much is reduced down to one story. What's the...
You mean what the height difference is between the previous proposal and this
the
one?
The question I'm particularly asking is, what's the length and width, the depth and the width of that one-story entranceway? If you could just scale it off of your plans, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board and give Daddy a chance maybe to answer these before we proceed any further.
Well, starting with lowering the overall height of the building, in this case here we're dealing with the over top of the second story is just roof. Mm-hmm. So we had the ability to lower the roof height because it doesn't impact any living areas or anything like that. But on this building, we're looking at we lowered the plates as much as we could and still maintain the livability of the unit, because on the third story you have the 2 bedrooms up on that third story. So there's really no way to lower them more than what we have done, which is roughly a foot or so. As far as any kind of impact, some of these issues were discussed, of course, at the Planning Commission, which ultimately approved the project. But as far as the difference between a 13-foot and a 15-foot setback here, I'm just speculating without doing a drawing. It's maybe adds 15 degrees or so to the view, to the openness of the view. As far as privacy, we've intentionally, from the very beginning, located the buildings as far away from the property line as possible by locating the driveway on that side. And then we did some further, changes on the second story there to change some of the windows out so that the view wouldn't be, would be sort of less invited to look out into that
You have
direction.
landscaping here that
And we
might
have
help.
landscaping on the property line that will
Or
pretty
help from
much
a view.
eventually block the view and, and provide the privacy over there. As far as this little cutaway from the mass of the building there, the one story, it's around 6 by 6, 6.5 by 6.5, something like
More
that.
long than it is shallow.
Yeah.
So this used to come out like that?
No, but it was a full 2 stories over this, and we
Yes.
cut away this corner here.
I see.
And made that a 1-story.
Okay.
Here you can see it in the floor plan up there.
Okay, so with that, I'd like to bring it back to the board for questions. Keith? Clay?
Mr. Chair, I have the question.
Yep.
The renderings that you're providing, are the colors in the rendering the direction you're going in general, or have you started to...
We put together a color board, which maybe we didn't really talk about that. With this color board, we're looking at 3 basic color schemes, utilizing earth tones, some different colors for windows, and then the 3 different stucco colors and some variations in the trim colors.
This is more or less...
So it's kind of in the direction, yeah. I mean, it's, as accurately as you can get it, just messing around with in CAD.
That was my question.
Okay, Paul, questions?
I'm impressed in the sense that you were able to steal 2 feet from a variety of buildings and smush it down, and you're impressed by lowering the building by 4 feet in height. What I wonder is in building 2 along the back property line, is it possible to lower this section? I'm looking at what you do there. This is a loss of bedrooms, and I understand that.
There's no...
But what head height is here that's usable that, besides just having balance and symmetry, or did you ever study the possibility of this one side elevation and what could happen to bring that down?
We did study it, and that's why we clipped these gables on the end to the degree that we could still maintain, the headroom in those units. And we've already really cut the headroom down. We've got area closets that have like 4 feet of headroom at the low end, or even less. And so we've really done everything that we could in that score. I mean, don't forget, this is a 45-foot height limit zone, and we're, below 35 feet on this project in height. So, I mean, we really have tried everything that we can. And at this point, we're certainly not going to entertain taking out another bedroom and making it a two-bedroom unit at that point. So.
Any other questions, Paul? Carol?
No questions.
Okay. Comments? Keith?
Overall, I think this is a really nice project. It's really well designed. I particularly appreciate getting the additional setback here. I think your solution with the trash enclosure there is the way to go. I think that's fine, and the roof cover there sort of blends it in. And I think this being only a 4-unit building, I don't think any sort of jogs and in and out in such a tight space really gains you anything architecturally. So I think your response and solution there is fine. I think there's enough other architectural variety that's good. It seems like all your plate heights are really reasonable, and I don't think there's a lot you can squeeze anywhere in that regard. So overall, I think you've responded positively to the previous comments, and I think it's really looking like it's ready for preliminary approval. I guess the one area where I may have some concern is just this east elevation here to the neighbor, considering they're at a lower elevation. And I'm not quite sure what you do there. It seems like there's circulation in closets and that there, so there isn't a lot of kind of windows that would create any privacy issue there, and perhaps it's more just a planting response there to bring the scale down of that wall to that lower neighbor. But that's really the only kind of concern I have. I think the distance you have here and the plantings here, and considering this is a side yard, I don't think there's too much concern in my mind with privacy to the south here. So anyway, like I said, I think it's a really nice project, and I think it's ready for preliminary approval.
Lee?
Mr. Chair, I continue to like this project. We've seen it several times. If I can go to the floor plan, actually. I agree with what Keith was saying on this east side, and maybe some nice mature trees can kind of help buffer that blank wall that's facing the backyards of those neighbors. At least that's what I can read from the drawing. It looks like the backyard. My two main comments are this one entry here at the Unit 10. Just looking from the... Hold on, let me get there. Just looking at this elevation here, one of the thoughts I had is maybe you've done a lot of nice recesses on other doors, and it might be nice to try to bring that element on this side and help that feel much deeper than it really is. Because I think this is the one that faces the street and the one that we've been most concerned about all the way along, and you've done that on the Oak Park Lane side. So for me, I'd like to see a little bit more articulation, perhaps recessing the door a bit. It'll help the stoop feel a little bit nicer. And my other comment, my second comment, is just the colors. I asked about the colors because the rendering, in some of the renderings, I feel like the building has a kind of monolithic feel to it, and I know it's hard to render this out exactly the way you want to do it sometimes, but it might be nice to try to articulate some colors to mix it up a little bit so that it doesn't feel like such a large taupe colored building.
Need a little more contrast.
Yeah, it might help with the scale of it a little bit in my mind. That was it for me.
Thanks, Clay. Paul?
My two comments are the same as Clay and Keith. I'll start with whatever this was, the east elevation of Unit 3. It needs some help. I believe that this roof can be clipped. And I just looked at the section area where the stairs happen and how there's the ceiling height, and perhaps there's a way that we can cut a little bit away. And then when I look at the side elevation, it just needs some articulation and help. And if there's anything we can do to bring this down, it would be much beneficial to the neighbor. So that's my first comment. The second one has to do with this carved entrance, which was Unit 10, which is what Clay was talking about. And I believe you can cut into that unit similar to what was cut in over here. You know, you cut into there X number of feet. This is an entrance. This person loses their interior foyer, but the neighborhood gains a little outdoor porch. So there's something that can happen here to help that elevation, and something over there to help this elevation. It is a well-designed project. There's a lot of neat things that are happening, but it's also going to be a shock to the neighborhood when it gets built, in the sense they're getting used to Cottage Hospital, but all the other apartment buildings that are there are much smaller scale, and this guy will come through and everyone's going to go, wow. So we need to work on that roof.
Thanks, Paul. Carol?
I have a few comments. Okay. All right, so... Okay, so what I'm seeing here, and I'm going to start with like what's good as an example. So as a person is looking down this long driveway, they have the 2 trees at the entry, and then midway down we have 2 canopies, which is really good. And then the terminus here is a grouping of trees. So this has the appearance of being nicely landscaped, especially with shadows of the canopy trees. However, on this side, we do have our 2 entry trees, which is good. But as a person looks down, this symbol is designated as a ground cover. So we really have a wide, long swath of hardscape. And then we have ground cover, and then we have the building. And in this planter right here, this would be a great opportunity for possibly 2 medium-sized trees or 1 large canopy tree. That's going to help this structure looking down on the driveway, but really from just to have an appearance of it being finished and landscape, this really not only needs a tree, but almost like 30-inch to 5 feet high planter, really to be like a terminus at the end of this. That also is the same comment to the guest parking here. Although we do have our 2 trees, which is good, this is a ground cover symbol, and we really don't have the stop. We don't have our edge. We don't have our separation between the guest parking and the lawn area and the trellis. So in this area around the guest parking, which is, I guess, the south of Unit 2, in these 2 planter areas, this really needs to be like minimally 30-inch high full shrubs in order to create that edge that we need there. This all looks really good landscape. I could imagine this would be a very pretty walk through here, but I would think that we have a missed opportunity, this is all ground cover, is to bring in a couple accent shrubs, because the tendency is a person cuts through these edges and either round them so a person is more directed as a person walks instead of this 90-degree configuration, or introduce shrubs on these corners to preserve the landscape intention here. Okay, along both streets here, we're kind of missing our street trees, and I'm not quite sure why. But we have our existing oak here. We have an opportunity for another street tree here. And then we have an opportunity for 2 street trees here. If not, a 3rd one here. It appears that on Los Olivos, we've got our street trees pretty well covered. But it's this Park Lane side, and it looks like the street tree is the Quercus edrifolia. And we really need to maximize the number of street trees that we could put in here. The next comment is, I see notes where it says, like, I'm just going to read an example. Existing 12-inch oak to be boxed and replanted after completion of grading. Oaks are not easily, boxed and replanted. So what I'd like to see in the final landscape plan is a commitment to a comparable size oak if these fail within 2 years after the completion of the landscape. And it's really a commitment promise of what the developer is going to do if these oaks aren't transplanted successfully. My last comment, actually the one before the last one, is as people park along Los Olivos to go into the entrances of this unit, and I would probably say really this unit too, to provide stepping stones or something that you think is within the material of your development, because otherwise if someone is trying to get into here and they park along here, they really will be trampling over the ground cover. So it's really best to direct people, and then you preserve your landscape. And then just a general comment, it appears in this walkway area in the middle and also along the frontage of Los Olivos that we have a great deal of ground cover in proportion to our shrubs. And the way I look at this, the ground cover seems to be the thing that either disappears when we're really in a drought, or it gets changed very easily. But the shrubs are the thing that really gives a project a maturity and a sort of a sustainability with the landscape. So I would really like to see a little less ground cover and more of a variety of shrubs. And that's really, true along here. We only have a few little foundation shrubs, and all of this is ground cover. And if we could really just bump up the variety and number of shrubs opposed to the square footage of ground cover, I think this is just going to be much more of a successful landscape project. Thank you.
Thanks. Kathleen, were you able to cover most of those, or? Okay. And my comments are exactly like Paul, Clay's, and Keith's. I think it's a really well-designed project, but there are two areas I think are weak right now, and it's the entry to this. I still think that, I wouldn't go over it again, but I think the others spoke well about it. And I'm particularly concerned on the eastern side of here, in as much as your lot is being built up also, and what this poses to this property owner here. And I think that Paul articulated what is possible that can happen there. And I think that those two areas, to me, are the points that I have the greatest concern about on this project. Okay, that's it.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. In terms of trying to deal with maybe some other way of doing this.
Speak up for the people.
Sorry. Some other way of dealing with this entrance. What would the board's response be to, putting the entrance to the unit off the path here, which would really give us the ability to sort of recess it similarly to the others? And I've got an idea about something we could do there.
Well, my
but it would put the reorient, because otherwise if you try to recess it here, it would interfere with the stairs. That's the issue that I'm not...
I think my first impression is that what has caused this in the first place is because we started with a series of units that went like this, and then this took second fiddle as this faces the street, and then the attempt was then to try and modulate this elevation to try and make it more like this. I think that when the entrance turns around here and then this becomes more of a wall that does not interact with the street, I think that we're weakening the project. And I personally would like to see it have this direct approach. And I'd like to get the other members' thoughts on that. Keith?
I would just throw out the idea perhaps there's more of a corner.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe there's a corner.
Recess, and then it's kind of acknowledges both and gives you the space to get the depth you're looking for.
Okay.
I think it should address, I'm not opposed to a corner idea, but I think it should address the street.
True. Well,
the way I was thinking of a solution was having your stairs start this direction, have a landing, and go this direction. Because you can have one step here. Because right now you're coming this direction up your stairs, so you can bend your stairs around and it can create like a little lower landing as a way of playing with the floor plan. And if this moves over 6 inches or something, it makes this room a little smaller. But there's a way that you can modify the stairs, which then allows you to modify this area to create the front porch that we're thinking about. So I would definitely agree that it needs to have a presence to the street. The roof that you have there is working. It just needs to have a little bit more craftsman articulation.
Carol?
Nothing to add.
Okay. So I think you've heard from us.
So again, just as a reminder, what we're looking for is preliminary approval subject to these things that we will come back and resolve for final when we come back with the final drawings.
Okay. So we would I'll entertain a motion at this point.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Clay?
Motion is for preliminary approval back, indefinite continuance back to full board.
Yes, I think for full board.
And preliminary approval with the following comments regarding architecture. Study the entry porch foyer on Unit 10. Study, next item would be study the eastern elevation and its how it addresses the neighbor. On Unit 3, east elevation, Unit 3. Come back with some revised colors or some ways to introduce accent colors into the project. And then all of Carol's landscape comments, which I know I'm not going to get.
You can watch it again on the reruns.
I could summarize if that becomes as necessary. It's okay.
She's got it?
Did you get them?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have
I
a
know there
second?
were street trees and a bunch of things. So.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Keith. Under discussion, I'd like to ask the maker and the first and seconder. I personally would prefer, instead of us, we're giving preliminary on this project right now, and all they have to do is comply with these two things. I think we all spoke fairly strongly about it. As opposed to just say study these two areas, I'd prefer language that would be a little bit stronger, something to the effect of redesign to achieve. It's up to you. I'm not going to say change it, but it would be my preference.
I guess my feeling is this applicant understands the directions that we're giving him, and I have confidence they'll be able to come up with what we're looking for.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay. Okay, that's it. They made the motion. Okay, so on the discussion, okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, just
One opposed.
I just wanted to say that to check with your planner about the street trees, and because they might need street committee approval for that. So you have an assigned planner, just so you could get that done early if that needed.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. That concludes our meeting for the evening. Good night, Santa Barbara.
Descending from your eyebrow to your toe. The possibilities are more than I can possibly enumerate. That's why you fascinate me so. So sermonize and preach to me. Make your sanctimonious lips